Good day, student! In this lecture video, we will going to talk about the annotation of Antonio Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. But before we were going to proceed to our proper discussion, let me introduce first our learning objectives. We aim to give an overview about the Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, to determine the underlying purpose of Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, as well as the motives of Jose Rizal annotating Morga's work, and lastly, to recall some notable annotation of Jose Rizal. So, kinsa man ni si Antonio de Morga di ay? Antonio de Morga is a Spanish conquistador, a lawyer, a historian, and a government official for 40 years in the Philippines. He authored the Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas and published it on 1609. This book narrates observations about the Philippines in the perspective of the Spaniards. So, kani siyang libro, it highlighted the Philippine society during Spanish colonization. This book is also the first fossil record of the earliest days of the Philippines as a Spanish colony. This book documented the achievements of the Spaniards during their discovery, conquest, and conversion. This book was consists of 8 chapters. Ang 1 to 7, it talks about the government, and the last chapter, the chapter 8, it talks about the Philippine island. Jose Rizal. So, unsa may involvement ani ni Jose Rizal towards the Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas of Antonio de Morga? Kini manggod si Jose Rizal class, he was an earnest seeker of truth. He wanted to know the real condition of the Philippines. However, the search for information during those time was difficult. Nga naman, it is because mostly of the narratives and sources were either written by a friar or a missionaries. And these friar and missionaries, they wanted to wipe out the traditional practices of the early Filipinos or the natives. Alright, so dili nato kalimtan class that one of the main goal of the Spaniards during their colonization period here in the Philippines was to convert the natives into Christianity. That's why they wanted to wipe out the traditional practices of the natives. So, moving on, Jose Rizal's pursuit of truth led him to seek out reliable accounts. Now, despite of the limited sources, Jose Rizal believed that the early Filipino culture was already self-sustaining before the arrival of the Spaniards. So, to support his claim, he really looked for a reliable account about Philippine history, particularly on the onset of the Spanish colonization. So, while he was in Europe, he came across research papers published by European scientists. These research papers talks about the ethnic community here in Asia. So one of those European scientists was Ferdinand Blumentritt. So Jose Rizal wrote to him and then they became friends. Ferdinand Blumentritt is the one who introduced Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas to Jose Rizal. Actually, class, kani si Jose Rizal, he asked Ferdinand Blumentritt to write about the Philippine history. However, Ferdinand Blumentritt rejected the offer of Jose Rizal because according to Blumentritt, na mas better daw kuno nga ang magsulat sa history sa isa ka nation is a person who came from that nation, not a foreigner. It is because that person is much aware about their culture and their tradition. So, Ferdinand Blumentritt is the one who influenced Rizal to write about the history of the Philippines. So, when Jose Rizal found out the account of Dr. Antonio de Morga, he immediately acquainted himself into the British Museum, and fortunately, he found a few remaining copies of Dr. Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. So of course, iyang gibasa tunga book and he was impressed by Dr. Morga's account. However, he encountered misinterpretations about the Filipino native culture. Then Jose Rizal, he added 639 footnotes. So unsa man day ning annotation class? So ang annotation, it is a note of explanation. No, it is an evaluation or an analysis. No, here atong gina-evaluate ang isa ka source or ang isa ka narrative. Atong ginapangita ang iyang strength ug ang iyang weakness. So when Jose Rizal observed that there are misinterpretation of the Filipino culture, no, so Jose Rizal, he republished Morga's work, highlighting the Philippines' advanced civilization prior to colonization. So he began writing it in London and finished it in Paris in 1890. Here is the reason why Rizal annotated Morga's successos. It is because due to its disjointed narrative and perceived bias towards defending the Spanish conquest. Jose Rizal observed that there are created stories and distorted facts supporting Morga's narrative. So here are some notable annotations of Jose Rizal. Geography. According to Morga, the Philippines was inhabitable. But to Rizal, the Philippines was not deserted and was actually habitable. For the climate, Morga said that winter and summer are opposite of those in Europe, and rainy weather is from June to September, summer is from October to May. According to Rizal, he stated that in Manila, by December to February, the temperature goes down more than it does during August to September. And thus, with regards to the season, it resembles Spain as all of the rest of the Northern Hemisphere. For the food, Rizal corrected the description of Morga. Because Morga, he said that the Filipinos prefer to eat fish which began to decompose and smell. Well, in fact, according to Rizal, we Filipinos, we have what we so-called, fermented fish. Ginamos in Bisaya. So according to Rizal, it is called bagoong, and all those who have eaten it and tasted it know that it is not or ought to be rotten. So for the social-cultural, according to Morga, that tribes are not safe because of violence. According to Rizal, the indigenous people, they will always choose violence because they experience exploitation and demoralization from the friars. According to Morga, men and women are money-loving and in capital, so when there is a prize, they yell. According to Rizal, we find it everywhere in the world, even in Europe. Morga also observed that the Indios bat their body on rivers or stream regardless of their age. According to Rizal, Indios also have hygienic costumes, which is the proper way of taking a bath. According to Morga, the natives sat on the borders of the rivers and streams near their settlements to secure them from the which they fear and venerate. Grave sorcerers and wizards who deceive the people and communicate to them whatever they wish. They believe in omens and superstitions. They could tell whether the person would live or die. So according to Rizal, proof to the story of Father Quirino about the case of Armandao who is sick, he often offered his body to see if he will be cured. But if he was cured, what could be said no to all who died despite all the masses offered to the different virgin? So here, it talks about the traditional practices of the indigenous people, here in the Philippines. It talks about the healers. We have the Katalunan and the Babaylan, who believe in omens and superstitions. According to Morga, the early Filipinos buried their dead on their own houses, keeping their bodies and bones for a long time in boxes and venerating their skulls. To Rizal, he said that it's much more natural and pious to venerate the remains of our loved ones than those fanatical martyrs whom we have no dealings and who probably will never remember us. And let us not forget that we Filipinos, we are family-centered. No, burying our loved ones near our houses, no, it shows our deep affection towards them. For the government, according to MORGA, there are no kings to rule them. Of course, Rizal agreed because we are not a monarchy. And also, MORGA observed our system of government that there are only one leader for each tribe. Rizal argued that it was better that way because having a leader that knows what the tribe needs and what problems they have is more effective. And this leader, we call this as the Datu. For the economy, MORGA observed that natives are always mining for gold, but when the Spaniard came, the mining became lesser and they just treasured what gold jewelry they have, passing it through generation. According to Rizal, the Indios, on seeing that wealth aroused the capacity of encomienderos and soldiers, abandoned the work in the mines, and the priest historian relate that in order to save them from vexation. All in all, here are Rizal's arguments of MORGA's SUCESOS. First, the people of the Philippines had a culture on their own prior to the coming of Spaniards. Second, the Filipinos were decimated, demoralized, exploited, and ruined by Spanish colonization. Third, the present state of the Philippines was not necessarily superior to its past. So this annotation of Jose Rizal mainly focus on correcting inaccuracies, adding historical context, and providing insight about the Filipino society, culture, and its achievements. And also, it particularly highlighted the sophistication of the pre-colonial Philippines and its contribution to civilization. This annotation of Jose Rizal served as a critic of the Spanish colonialism and a means to educate us Filipinos with our history and our heritage. And that's the end of our discussion. Thank you for listening.